Hello, I'm Yesenia Taveras with WITN 22, and I'm here with Lisa Thomas-Laury, former news anchor with WPVI Channel 6 ABC in Philadelphia. Hello.
Hello, very nice to meet you.
Nice to
beautiful afternoon.
Yes,
Cold.
I was going to say nice to have you here in Wilmington.
Yeah, so I enjoyed this afternoon. It was very nice.
Wonderful. You had such a great speech today. It was nice to get a short testimony, but also just a dive into your journey. For those who weren't here in attendance, can you tell us a little bit about your start in your career?
Okay, let's see. Well, I started like the little girl we were talking to earlier, 3rd grade, writing school plays. That's where the passion for writing, and you could call that a little bit of production. And ever since, I've been doing something literary. You know, I wrote for the school newspaper in high school in Dunbar, West Virginia. And when I went to college, I had a scholarship that ran out, and there was a job opening for a weather girl, and I had always wanted to be a magazine writer. And I majored in print media, but when I did the weather job, I got the bug for being on camera and broadcasting. In that final year, after being a weather girl for almost 3 years, the final year of college, I asked if I could be the news intern. And that's when I really realized how much I liked going out in the community and gathering news and making it into a nice story.
Wonderful. And Lisa, the both of us are minority women, and you are in a male-dominated industry. So if any, what adversities did you face, and how did you just keep the confidence to just continue on in this industry to be successful?
Right. You know, when I first started out, you're absolutely right, Yesenia. That was a time when the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, began cracking down the year I graduated, 1975, on TV stations to hire women and women of color, men of color, but the real crackdown was for more women. You didn't see many women anchoring the news then, you know, the Walter Cronkite era, they were all Caucasian men. And so I was in the right place at the right time, being a double minority. But then once you get in the door, you do meet some resistance and some resentment. And you just have to maintain that confidence. You know, I think about what is considered sexual harassment today. I didn't even get into that in my speech. But boy, back in the day, there was quite a bit of just general talk in the newsroom. And we would call it sexual harassment today. But, you know, you go with the flow. And if you really believe in yourself, and you put out a good product. I remember when I first went to Oklahoma City, I knew I could put a good news story together. And the guys there, they sort of took us for granted. They thought it was sort of cute that we women, I think there were 2 others, me and 2 others, women in a newsroom where there were 8 to 10 men. And we were doing most of the feature reporting. And I would go out and cover things in the community. But there was one day when we had a reporter named Brad. He did all the political stuff. And Jimmy Carter came to town. And he wasn't there, and they asked me to do the story. And I ended up doing a pretty good job of it. And the news director came out the next day when Brad was there and said, "Well, Brad, we didn't," first he said, "Brad who?" "We didn't miss you yesterday, Brad. Lisa did a real good job." And, you know, it was half kidding, but at the same time, I knew he thought I did a good job, and it made me feel, and I was treated differently after that. There was that level of respect that I think I earned just replacing him that one day.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that amazing how sometimes as women we feel like with our work ethic and just our work in itself, we always have to kind of prove ourselves when we're amongst our counterparts.
Right, right, and we have to work twice as hard. You know, we do have to prove ourselves. We did have to prove ourselves, and I always felt like I had to be on my A game, that I couldn't make those little mistakes that I'm sure the guys just, you know, brushed off. So yeah, it was a real challenge, and it wasn't always fair, but life's not fair. And you know, how good do we women feel today? that we were the trailblazers, and look at the women who come in after us. They're strong and they're knowledgeable and they're confident, and they get better and better.
And what advice would you give to those young journalists, those young minority women who are attending a university or even a college within their local district that want to pursue a field in media and journalism? It's evolved over the years, but it's Women History Month, and like you said, you set the tone for us, the trailblazer, gave us women encouragement to go ahead and pursue this career and that we can be successful, seize the moment and opportunity like you just mentioned. What other advice can you share with us?
Well, you have to do your homework. You have to be up on things. But I think the main advice remains the same all these years. And it's what I learned starting out and what I continue to think women need to learn, and that is to read. Read everything you can get your hands on. If you're not interested in something, make yourself read about it. I wasn't interested in politics in the beginning, and I knew that I wanted to be able to be called upon to do stories in politics. And I actually took a couple of night classes, in political science and in politics in general. And just when you read, and President Obama used to say this, you absorb the knowledge of the world. Find out what books are good. Find out who someone you admire, who inspires you, reads, and try to start with that book.
And I'm a huge advocate on your local library. The books are free. Just get your little card, and you don't have to worry about buying a book.
Buying a book, exactly. And look, they've got Kindle today. If you're really, really lazy, audiobooks. I'm getting ready to do an audiobook for older residents. But I always had a love of reading. It's just that I like to read what I like to read. And after I forced myself to read, I got good advice about books and politics. After I forced myself to start doing it, I'd look forward to the next book and the next book and the next article. And it paid off.
I was going to say, that's right. You're an author, even though you're retired from the news anchor position and being in the media. You are an author. You have your book out now. Let's talk a little bit about that endeavor and where has that led you to, and how accomplished do you feel now about having your journey told to all of us here?
Yeah, it's a good feeling. I mentioned in my talk today that there was a short time after my second bone marrow transplant that I didn't want to revisit that. I didn't want to relive those days because some of them were difficult and hard. But after I got into it and I listened to what my son was telling me that I could help people, I found that it was therapeutic. That it really was therapeutic for me to relive. There's a time when I wasn't giving up faith, but I did have a moment where my mother reminds me that I said I wanted to die. And it was short-lived, but that's an experience, and that taught me that I needed to be a little stronger, that I've been knocked down a little bit, I needed to get back up. And you don't know how resilient you can be until you go through something like that. And it was a journey, but it was my journey. I think it was a journey that I was meant to have. And I think God did have another plan for me when I went through that. And my son was the conduit for me getting there. And I'm just grateful that he taught me and that I listened, and that it is helping people. And I have this experience post Channel 6.
Right. And how important is it to have that faith, not only within your career so you can get to the next level, but just in life in general, dealing with the diagnosis? How important is it just to have that all-around faith?
I go back to a book I read by James Baldwin. Faith is the evidence. Well, the book's title is The Evidence of Things Not Seen. And it is from the epistle to the Hebrews. Faith is the existence of things, the evidence rather, I'm sorry. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. And faith was a part of my life as a child. You know, like I said, my mother was a devout Catholic, and there was 4 of us, and even though I and my 3 brothers did not follow Catholicism when we grew up, that was a strong foundation for us, faith and spirituality and believing in something bigger than oneself. That was a huge thread that was woven into our lives, and you know, it carried our very existence.
And lastly, I'm sitting here thinking about your journey and how you started, and you also mentioned about not when the FCC needed to hire women of color, but not being black enough. How did that play in your journey, that role of not necessarily racism, but just the color of your skin? Because Black History Month just finished, but as we all know, blacks had a contribution all year round. So what can you speak on in regards to that?
That, you know, that can be a tough time, and I was very fortunate that for example, when I found out that Oprah had been turned down for a job that I got, I had my feelings on it. It's a sensitive topic because there is racism within the black community and there's resentment. I didn't want it to be resentment between us, and I had gotten to know her just those 2 days in Nashville. And I think I brought it up. I was designated the Oprah reporter, and I was going up to Chicago. She had already come through Philly with her syndication, the launch of her syndication. And I went up, I said, you know, I'm the Oprah reporter now. And we chatted, and she brought out a note that I had sent her thanking her for her hospitality when I came to interview for the job. And she said, I always held you in high regard because you wrote me this thank you note. And so I felt comfortable after that in mentioning, I said, you know, I just found out that you tried out for the Philly job. And she looked at me and I looked at her and we just burst out laughing. Because at that moment, it was just the right moment. And it can be something divisive if you let it. But it also, it was our little secret. Like, I knew she should have gotten it, and I knew why she didn't, and she knew why she didn't. And so I was like her biggest supporter. I was her biggest champion because I knew how talented she was. She was the one that made my jaw drop in that hotel room when I first came for the job interview. And we figured out, we shared this at one point, we were both true to our calling, true to ourselves. I wanted a family, and I wanted a job, and a job I loved, and a career. I wanted to anchor, but I wanted a family. Oprah didn't want to have anything to do with the family. She wanted the world to be her family. I think Oprah knew she was destined for greatness. Even back then, I think she knew she was destined for greatness. And so I wasn't really surprised at what she accomplished. And I remember when she came down to Philly to launch her syndication, and she was going to be on our network, ABC, all she wanted to talk about was Stedman. She had just met Stedman, and she was in love. And she wanted to be in love, but I knew she would never marry Stedman.
I was going to say, it's okay to still be in love while you're pursuing your career.
Right. And he was the right one. I mean, he supported her all the way, and it takes a special, strong man to support a woman and love a woman like Oprah.
And that's amazing as you tell her story. And in honor of Women's History Month, I hear a sense of sisterhood. And we live such in a competitive world right now, and you know, trying to get this job or the next job.
Right.
But how important is it to keep that sense of sisterhood, regardless of the race? How important is that?
It's very important. It's very important, you know. And I've always been one to support and applaud women who support other women. You know, we can't have this little pettiness and this bitterness. And I find that joining a sorority helped me with that. And let's see, there were other, Jack and Jill. One of the ladies here said, "Do you belong to the Links, don't you?" And I said no, but I didn't get to expand on it. I just couldn't join everything, but Jack and Jill was important because we lived in the suburbs, and I wanted my kids to know other black kids and to know, black history, and so that was important. And it has to do with how you're raised. My mother was head of social services for like 20 years in West Virginia, in Charleston, West Virginia, and she was beloved because she didn't have her head in the skies. She always supported women to come up. And there was one woman who even took over her job when she became ill, and they were the best of friends. And it could have been a competitive thing, but it wasn't. So I have to thank my mother for that, and the fact that a sorority taught me those bounds of sisterhood and family.
Well, thank you so much. Anything else you would like to share before we leave in regards to just words of encouragement, your book, your journey in general?
One of the very important things I learned when I went through my journey, I became ill, I found the correct doctor, I believed in the power of prayer. I think that had a lot to do with the wonderful people of the Delaware Valley who, when I returned as a reporter, told me daily that they prayed for me. One of the important things I learned was you must be an advocate for your own health care. You have to do research. You have to stay on top of the doctors, get first, second, third, fourth opinion. Don't believe that first doctor. And just, don't give up.
Like you said, find the answers because you can be misdiagnosed, and it's very important to take ownership of your health.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Lisa.
You know I'm a hugger.
Yes, this is a historic moment for me. It's just such an honor to be in your presence. You're just such a beautiful woman, and to have been so successful in your career and after your career as well. It's very encouraging.
And you're taking the reins, and you'll pull us all the way up.
Thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you so much for watching. I'm Yesenia Taveras with WITN 22 reporting in Wilmington, Delaware.